Live from Liverpool, The Dark Paranormal, Season 16. Hello everyone, and welcome back to The Dark Paranormal, Season 16, Episode 3. First and foremost, a huge thank you to everyone who reached out following Episode 2, It Comes From the Ground. I had an inclination that episode would draw a lot of interest, and indeed it proved the case. So thank you for everyone who got in touch. For today's experience, we have something rather unique. We have the individual who submitted the experience, and they themselves have reached out to their ex-partner in order to get their version of events to validate their experience, and they've obliged. So roughly 80% of this experience is from our submitter, and the final 20 is further validation of what you'll have heard. And this particular experience was chosen for this season because of that validation. Because we've spoken in the past how exceptionally rare it is that your experiences within the paranormal sphere can ever be validated. And when we deal within the realm of something that can never truly be scientifically proven, unless we have something caught on camera or audio, the next best thing is to have a third party confirm what we're saying is the truth. For me, I'm much more likely to be terrified if 3 individuals all claim to have seen the same, rather mundane paranormal experience than I am if one person tells me something absolutely chaotic. For a topic where 99% of what we hear is anecdotal, to have your experience corroborated is as good as we're going to get, evidentially. But before we get to today's intriguing experience, we need to, of course, thank our wonderful members over on Patreon. When you decide it's the right time to join our team at Patreon, not only will you get these episodes both ad-free and before everyone else, but you can also gain exclusive access to our Patreon-only podcast, Dark Bites. Dark Bites releases each and every week of the year without fail, and it has over 60 hours worth of back catalogue for you to go and binge. But the best thing about our Patreon team is the community. We've built a wonderful community of like-minded paranormal enthusiasts over on Patreon. And each week on Dark Bites for 30 minutes, we share the shorter experiences that we receive for the show. The keyword for our community is respect. And sincerely, I've been members of paranormal communities on social media, etc. And I can honestly say, even though our group is made up of skeptics and believers, that there is no safer space for people to come and share their experiences than our Patreon community. But don't take my word for it. We'd love to extend an exclusive invitation just for you. Simply head over to patreon.com/thedarkparanormal. Just like the following wonderful new team members have: Brian Abraham, Candice, HK, Hayley Osland, Aisha Lockett, Candice Marie, Judy G, Hayley Perkins, Zach Abrego, Mimi Pelletier, Fasha Reed, Bree Brown, Emma Durham, Brittany Taylor, Brianna Trapper, Gabriela Rodriguez, Tina Castry, Tori Stevens, Yvonne Bartling, Lauren Knight Monk, Holly, Daniel Chapman, Jesse Coldfelter, and Lacina Hart. Thank you so much for the support, guys. It genuinely means the world. And I hope you enjoy all the ad-free early releases of premieres, finales, minisodes, and everything on this feed. Plus, of course, joining us every Sunday of the year for an episode of Dark Bite to share those shorter experiences. And if you haven't heard your name yet, do not worry, we're working through the list we built up between seasons 15 and 16. So if you enjoy the show and would love to come and join us for less than the price of a coffee a month, head over to patreon.com/thedarkparanormal. And if that all sounded a bit too fast, I apologise. I'm trying my best to get to the experiences within the first 5 minutes. So now it's time. Lower the lights. Make yourself comfortable and, of course, leave your disbelief at the door as we hear about someone chosen from the shadows. Hi, Kev. It's taken me some time to put this all to paper. mainly because I felt talking about it will then put it in the forefront of my mind, and in turn, open me up to dreams, or should I say nightmares, or even perhaps subconsciously call it to me in some way. First, I'll begin by introducing myself. My name is Missie, and feel free to use my name and all the other names in the story. I'm certain that the commonality of our names will not identify us to any listeners that may be from our area. So here it goes. I'm currently in my 46th chapter of life, a transplant, so to speak, from rural West Virginia to eastern Kentucky. I've various hobbies I love, from paranormal investigating to embracing my mountain and Wiccan roots. I'm often harvesting and collecting herbs, so I can create different concoctions and tinctures. I grew up on stories of mountain monsters, cryptids, ghosts and the like. I work in corrections, and therefore I consider myself fairly tough. Numb to certain things, I guess. And I don't generally consider myself afraid of things that go bump in the night. That's why this incident really messed me up for quite some time. And if I'm being totally honest, I'm still not and may never get over it. I lived with my then boyfriend in a brand new home. So brand new, no one had ever lived there before us. The home we lived in was on his father's family's property. My boyfriend, Caleb, had purchased the plot of land from his father, but it was still only a small piece of a very large tract of land. The land extended up the mountain, behind where our home sat, and then stretched out even farther. I cannot do it justice trying to describe it. I can only say that we lived on a corner of a very large rectangular piece of land. It was as we were moving in and setting up the house that my eldest son contracted COVID, and he was extremely ill, hospitalized, and for a moment, which seemed like forever for this mama bear, we thought we'd actually lose him. Thankfully, he pulled through and has had no lasting damage or effects, thank the gods. However, Joshua, that's my son, is autistic, and he just talks to people all the time. But people that I, nor others in the home, can see. He once kept talking about a pink lady. A pink lady who watches over him. Interestingly, he said he would see her just before he would have a seizure. She would tell him to sit down and reassure him everything will be okay. He also said he saw her at a time when I was very ill, and she, once more, reassured him that I'd be fine. You see, I had a small blood clot, one which hit my brain, and I went down right in front of him. He told me the pink lady was there, and she told him how to contact 911 and how to get help for me. Well, he successfully called 911 and an ambulance came to me in the nick of time. It gave me the medical care I needed before there was any lasting damage. So my baby basically saved my life. It turns out with the assistance of my grandmother. It wasn't until a few years ago that Josh saw a photo of my maternal grandmother. My grandmother, who had passed away long before he was born. He stared at the photo and then said, "Look, Mama, it's the pink lady." I explained to him that that was my mother's mother, my grandmother, and his great-grandmother. To which he replied, "No, that's the pink lady, the lady that takes care of me when I'm scared." Oh, how I wish that my mama was here, on this plane, to know that her beloved mother was my son's guardian angel. Sorry, I got away from the story there. I was just trying to say that I have read that those with intellectual delays are generally more receptive to the spirit realm. And that does play a part in my experience. I worked the overnight shift, which was 12 a.m. to 12 p.m. So I was accustomed to sleeping during the day, except on my days off, where I would stay awake and then go to bed early that first night, so I could try to enjoy my days off. This night, I was not as exhausted as usual, and I'd done some running around with my family and just enjoyed time with them. I arrived back home, showered, and climbed into bed. It was at that time I noticed my exhaustion, and it wasn't long before I felt my entire body relax and felt myself beginning to drift off to sleep. And then suddenly, I felt the foot of the bed sink. I was still half awake, half asleep when I felt the foot of the bed sink. It was like someone had sat down on the foot of the bed. Now, this didn't immediately bother me, because sometimes my son, Joshua, will come in and check on me just to see if I'm asleep. He's also said that he likes it when I'm home with him at night, so this didn't concern me. At first, I felt myself continue to drift off. You know that state where you're aware of sounds and voices and things around you, but you're still in a sleep state? Well, that was me at this point. It was then I felt the bed depress with force, up around my knees. I was laying on my right side, with my left leg thrown up over a pillow. Then something grabbed my ankles, threw me over so I was laying on my back. I felt pressure moving up my body, so much pressure. My thighs were burning under the pressure. I could not move. I felt this weight moving up my body. It felt like it would crush me. I'd hoped it was a nightmare, but I just couldn't wake up. Now, I do suffer from sleep paralysis, and in my mind I'm telling myself, this is just an episode of sleep paralysis. Just breathe. Focus on your breathing. Slow and steady. In and out. In and out. But the pressure, it was great. So heavy. I felt like I would die. I tried to yell, "Josh! Josh! Help!" But nothing would come out. I tried to whimper, to moan, to grunt. Just any sound I could make to get his attention. And then it happened. "Josh!" I was able to attract his attention, and he burst into the bedroom. And just like that, the heaviness was gone. To keep him calm, I told him I was okay, I'd just had a bad dream, and told him to go back to bed. Meanwhile, I jumped up, and I ran into the bathroom. We had an ensuite, and I pulled the door up behind me. To try and gather my composure and figure out what the hell just happened to me, I sat on the side of the bathtub. I slowed my breathing, in and out, in and... Then I looked at my thighs, and I saw it. 2 red marks on each of my inner thighs. It looked like when you push the butt of your palm into your skin. I was speechless. This was not a dream, not sleep paralysis. This was real. I looked up and glanced into the bedroom, and right on my side of the bed, in the corner, right where my head was once laying, was an ominous black shape. A figure. A black figure. What the fuck is going on here? I was only in my sleep shirt and shorts, but I ran out of the bedroom, jumped in the car, and I left. Now, I know you're all probably wondering, why did she leave her child there? Well, the answer's simple. He was not under any attack. Plus, the Pink Lady, his great-grandmother, was always watching over him. He was going to be just fine. I did, however, stop before I got into my car and said very confidently, "If you harm my child in any way, I swear I will destroy you." I called Caleb and I told him what happened, and I said I wasn't going back in that house. He said, okay, relax, calm down, I'll be back soon. And he began the 45-minute drive home. I was still shaken up by the entire event, and I called one of my friends and I unloaded on her, while sat in my car shivering in the parking lot of a local filling station. To say I was a complete wreck would be the understatement of the century. After I got all of this out and heard myself saying it out loud, I realized I needed to get home to check on my boy. Caleb was close to home now, so I proceeded to the house. I slowly got out of my car and I walked up the steps to the porch. The heaviness was palpable. You could just feel it sitting on your shoulders, surrounding you, enveloping you. It was all just so much, all at once. I opened the door, walked inside, and my son was still fast asleep in his room. The sight gave me a small sense of peace in this chaotic space. The house still felt heavy. I just felt like I wasn't safe in there. And then Caleb pulls into the driveway, and he wastes no time in getting into the house. He tells me to recount the story to him once more, and I do. Then he has me open the front door and the back door, and he proceeds to order this, and I use this term loosely, this thing out of the house. Now, I'm not privy to what he says, but he has me step out on the front porch whilst he orders it out. The house feels a little less heavy afterwards, but I know that whatever it is still there, lurking. Today's show is sponsored by Acorns. Now, I used to believe investment was only for people on Wall Street or people with finance degrees, people who used phrases like buy low, sell high, and other things I will never understand. But the one thing I do understand is the importance of letting your money and your future having a chance to grow. However, investments can seem daunting and most people don't know where to start. And for many people, including me, you believe you need a lot of money before you start investing. Plus, we all have busy lives and we don't have the time to go researching how you start investing. So we say I'll do it tomorrow or next week or next month, but we all know tomorrow never comes. But Acorns make it so easy to start saving and investing for your future. You don't need a lot of money or expertise to invest with Acorns. In fact, you can get started with just your spare change. Acorns recommend an expert-built portfolio that fits you and your money goals, and then automatically invest your money for you. I've recently turned 45 and investment has never been on my radar, but people like Acorns are so clear and straightforward they've not only put it on my radar but took it off my plate. So head over to acorns.com/dark paranormal or download the Acorns app today and start saving and investing for your future today. Paid non-client endorsement. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Investment involves risk. Acorn Advisors LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/dark paranormal. Even though Caleb had ordered this thing out, I refuse to have the bedroom door shut whilst I'm there. I cannot bear the thought of being locked up in a room with that thing. I would refuse to undress in my own bedroom. I would always go into the bathroom and shut the door before I'd undress. Showers were taken with the bathroom door closed, but the bedroom door open. It was horrible. It was like I was living uncomfortably in my own home, like I was constantly a victim of voyeurism. This was no kind of life for anyone. And then one night, whilst I was leaving for work, I saw it. There, right up in front of my car, in the weeds, a tall, dark figure just stood there, just looking in my direction. I couldn't make out facial features. I couldn't see eyes. I just knew it was looking at me. I recited that same threat, or promise as it were, that I had all those days since my attack. If you harm my child or anyone in that home that I love, I will destroy you. I kept my eyes on it as it retreated deeper and deeper into the blackness of the trees and brush. I felt safe leaving, but I was concerned that it would show up after I left, and I wouldn't be there to protect my family. I figured that if it was so determined to terrorize me, would it move on to my loved ones in my absence? So many questions. I was told later by Caleb there was an entity that wandered the property. It had been seen by his father, his uncles, his grandfather's wife, and several other people that lived on this rather large piece of land. He went on to tell me that his father had even been attacked by this big black shadow. But he refused to acknowledge if anything happened to him. He just said once, and I quote, he was held down and suffocated by a dark shadow. It seems they would all admit to seeing it, but no one would admit or accept that it had tried to harm them. It was also revealed to me that the road that ran in front of our home was the main thoroughfare for traffic many, many years ago, and that an old schoolhouse once sat where our home currently sat. Well, this made sense to me. As I told Caleb, on more than one occasion, I'd heard children laughing and the sound of children playing. This usually occurred at night. I'd be in bed reading, and it was never anything other than the joyful sounds of happy children. In addition to the children laughing, I was also warned of a little girl that would show herself at times. It's believed that she was the victim of a bear attack. I never saw her. I only heard that she was a spirit on the property, one that had been seen by almost the entire family. A railroad system was also part of the area, so who knows how many lost souls are wandering that property today. I continued to see the black figure, to feel it around me. I would see it move behind the shower curtain whilst I showered. I'd feel it brush past me in the bedroom. I'd feel it sitting on the bed with me at night. But I refused to acknowledge it, to give it any more power. But I did notice it would still affect my mood, my peace. I lost one of my baby sisters in February 23, and that was a big shock to me. Her passing was completely unexpected. I would hear something tell me all the time that I was a bad person, that it was my fault she died. I literally felt at fault for her death because of all the negativity that was constantly being thrown at me. I shouldn't have felt that way. I was with her in her final hours and even held her hand as she slipped from this life to the next. I knew I'd done all I could for her, so why now was this affecting me? I would keep my great-nephew, my late sister's grandson, from time to time. He was just a happy little baby. But it got to the point where I felt unsafe keeping him, because I didn't want this thing to attack him, to touch him, to even exist in his light. So I stopped keeping him overnight, and I would only keep him during the day. We did the usual protection rituals and blessings, salted the windows, etc., and for a while it seemed to work. Whatever this thing was, it was weakened to the point that it wasn't affecting me. But then, as soon as happiness began to take over our home, it was back. I began to feel very unhappy. I even began to feel like Caleb was unhappy. I tried to talk to him about it one day, and a little voice in my ear said, "He wants you to leave. He's always tired of putting on a happy face for you. You're too much work for him. He's young. He deserves better than you. He's not happy with you anymore." So I started a conversation with Caleb. I began to tell him that I knew he was unhappy, that I was unhappy, that maybe we should just call it quits. Caleb sat while I unloaded everything and took it all in. And then he looked at me and said, "I've not really been happy lately." Shit! This thing was right. It knew. It knew he wasn't happy and was putting on a facade that he was. I'd been blind to his peace. We decided to amicably part ways. Many that knew us were shocked that we decided to do this. It seemed that it was for the better. Or was it? I began to pack my things up to move them out. But every time I went to that house to get something, I'd get that all too familiar feeling. A feeling of something watching me, laughing at me, laughing at my pain. It felt like it wanted me to leave the property, to leave Caleb. It made me feel so uncomfortable, so unwanted, and it pushed me away from a man that loves me still so much. Whilst I cannot say that it targeted me specifically for any reason, or kept up with its attacks on me, it did convince me to leave. And since I've been gone, I haven't heard or felt anything. I know that whatever that entity is attached to that property. It is only powerful on that land, and it can only hurt people on that property. I now feel safe. I sleep without fear of being attacked, harmed, assaulted. I have spoken to Caleb, and there is an understanding that I could never live on that property again. Never in that house again. what with all that happened to me there. And he seems to understand how I feel, but he cannot completely wrap his head around it, because he hasn't experienced it firsthand. And I hope, for his sanity and peace, he never does. I love the podcast. Cheers, Missie. But Missie's tale does not end there. As I said earlier, she contacted Caleb. And she responded, "I've spoken to Caleb and asked him to share some of his experiences. His response is below." So, this is Caleb's response. "I can say that my family has lived on the land for over 20 years. My family lived on the other side of the hill for around 25 to 30 years. So we have been connected to that land for around 50 years. I've been told stories about how the land is haunted. And there was a little girl that was murdered. Another little girl was attacked and killed by a bear. Legends, you know. There was a time that the land was mined, and there was logging done on the hill. People have always lived on this land, so there's always been a presence on that mountain. The first inclination I personally had that made me believe that something malevolent was on that mountain was when my dad told me of a black shadow, or entity of sorts, which held him down on the bed and laughed in his face when he obviously could not breathe. He stated it was large, black, had red eyes, and smelled really bad. My dad was unable to speak whilst this was happening to him, and he doesn't talk too much about it. He'll give you the general gist, but he won't go into detail. And he gets very offended and defensive if you try to imply he's lying or talking bull. A few years after he was attacked by the black figure, my dad told me that one night, while laying on his bed, he saw a little girl standing in his bathroom, staring at him. My dad refers to this little girl as just another form of the demon, as he calls it, that attacked him. In the years that have followed, I've been informed by my grandfather's wife that members of her family that also live on the hill have seen the little girl, and that my grandfather's wife has also seen this black entity. And she is a God-fearing woman and would not tell tales. It's been surmised through various conversations that the little girl may not be another form of the black entity, like my dad believes. My uncle has stated that something is also tormenting him. He also lives on the hill. I used to enjoy hunting, and there'd be times I would ride my four-wheeler up on the hill and just park and wait for the wildlife to come to me. I spent my childhood exploring the mountainside, so I could take you just about anywhere up there. I know that hillside so well. But there've been times that I felt like I needed to get out of there fast. As in, do not let the sun go down whilst you're up here. Get out before it's dark. It's not safe. I've also seen animals that some claim do not exist in our woods. A black panther, for instance. I can say that I did see a large, looming, black shadow that was stood out by my home, and that this was after Missie was attacked. The night I ordered that entity to leave the home, I did feel it, and I did feel as though it left. I can tell you that after she left, the house still feels heavy. It's lonely, depressing. I try to avoid being here, unless it's to sleep. And as pessimistic as I tend to be, I fully believe that what happened to her was very real. If she was looking for attention or a reason to leave, then it would have been, well, this happened, and then nothing else to follow. But since she left, I feel the heaviness and emptiness. I feel the emotions that she projected when she recounted her experiences here. I have no choice but to believe that something lives alongside us on our family land. And it picks and chooses who it wants to be seen by. And it picks and chooses whom it wants to terrorize. Caleb. Well, thank you so much to both Maisie and Caleb for collaborating for this week's episode of The Dark Paranormal. It's coincidental, I hope at least, that a lot of our episodes recently have featured land being the haunted thing, not a house, so to speak. And I do think there is something to certain types of, be it soil or rock, that sits beneath the foundations of an area or a home, that may have more sort of projectile powers in terms of a supernatural presence. We know stone tape theory is reliant on iron, the idea being you can record onto iron. And although we know that's fact, i.e. in the 80s or 90s, for those old enough to remember, you'd often buy a blank cassette, and that cassette would either feature Fe, which was the periodic symbol for iron, or it would say ferrous, again meaning iron, so you can record to iron. But in the same way, when things are burned, they become a completely different structure. I do wonder if there's another sort of stone, crystal, gem, sand even, that is more widespread around, say, mountainous regions, such as described in this experience. And whereas iron seems to be a prevalent factor in stone tape theory, i.e. the replaying of a residual haunting, maybe, and this is a wild idea, but aren't they all, maybe this substance has the ability to harness and project sentient entities. I guess it's only as feasible and provable as stone tape theory for residual hauntings. But Missy, thank you so much for your first 80% of that experience. Now, to Caleb's last part. That really piqued my interest for two reasons. One, it validates Missy's experience 100%. And two, you say since she's left, you've started to experience similar things, similar emotions, similar feelings. And it reminds me of one of my favourite books of all time. And yes, I've mentioned it before, but it's Will Storr versus the Supernatural. And I would suggest any paranormal fan has a copy of this on their bookshelf. But within that book, there is a terribly sad story. A man sends a letter to the sadly now deceased Lou Gentili, who was a self-proclaimed demonologist and ghost hunter. And in this letter, the man describes that his wife, for so many years, had been saying to him she's being plagued by shadow people stood at the end of her bed. She would wake him up, she would point and say, "Can't you see them?" And he couldn't. And therefore he thought she was either going slightly mad or she was just hallucinating after a nightmare. Sadly, these sightings, this lack of validation, caused her to take her own life. He explains in the note to Lou Gentili that she'd put in her suicide note she could no longer handle being harassed by these shadow beings. But why send Lou Gentili this tale of woe? Well, the day after her funeral, he woke up at 2 a.m. in the morning and was greeted by a group of shadow figures stood at the end of the bed. You can only imagine A, the fear he felt at seeing them, and B, the guilt he felt at denying his wife when she said they were stood there. Thankfully, in Caleb and Missy's story, there have been no suicides involved. But there does seem to be some sort of link between you, Caleb, not experiencing as much whilst Missie was there, and once she leaves, well, if a comedian has a bad set in a small club and people start leaving in their droves, when that final person is sat there, the comedian focuses on them. And I think that's what you're going through right now, Caleb. The only advice I would give you is to do what Missie had previously done, and that is to not give it the attention it clearly so desperately needs. But thank you both so much for such an intriguing and terrifying experience for episode 3. I'll speak to you all again on Wednesday for our next mini-sode, and don't forget, if you have a paranormal experience of any length, send it on over to contact@thedarkparanormal.com. If it doesn't end up on this feed, it will end up on Dark Bites. So either way, it will not be a wasted venture for you to type out your experience. It will find an audience. As ever, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for choosing to spend your time with me here on your show. For our Patreons, I'll speak to you again on Sunday for another installment of Dark Bites. And for everyone, remember, when you're discussing the paranormal, always try and leave some of your disbelief at the door. And I'll see you next time, right here on the Dark Paranormal.